2 empty chairs. That's what faced me when my name was called at Harvard Yard. No roses, no cameras, just 2 name cards Mom and Dad fluttering in the breeze while Miss Texas blared 2,000 miles away. Hours later, one photo from my cousin flipped our town upside down. The perfect family finally met the truth. Church whispers, community pages on fire. And me, I didn't argue. I didn't chase. I made one decision that changed everything forever. You want to know how the applause at my graduation became their reckoning? Stay, because the next 10 minutes explain why I never looked back. Where are you watching from? I was born and raised in Abilene, Texas, a small town where everyone knows your story before you even live it. Sundays were for church, Wednesdays for gossip, and every family had a role to play. Ours was supposed to be the perfect one, at least that's what my mother worked so hard to make people believe. My mother, Linda Hart, used to be Miss Texas back in the 80s. She never really took off the crown, just traded it for a family she could parade. To her, beauty wasn't just skin deep, it was sacred. She called it the Hart legacy, like it was some kind of royal bloodline passed through sequins and smiles. My father, Robert Hart, owned a small auto repair shop on the edge of town. He was quiet, soft-spoken, the kind of man who thought silence kept peace. He rarely contradicted my mother, and when he did, it ended with that tired phrase he always used, "Let it be live." As a kid, I thought those words meant love. As an adult, I realized they meant surrender. Then there was my sister Savannah, 6 years younger and the sunshine of the Hart family. Mom said she had the kind of smile that wins rooms. Savannah grew up in a world of ruffled dresses, glitter crowns, and posture lessons, while I grew up behind the curtain zipping up her gowns and carrying her heels. I wasn't bitter, not at first. I just believed that if I worked hard enough, Mom would notice me too. I was the quiet one with straight A's, debate trophies, and an obsession with law books. But every time I showed her another certificate, she'd say, "That's nice, honey, but remember, confidence makes you beautiful." It took me years to realize that in her language, beautiful meant worthy. Our house was a museum of her glory days, photos of her pageant wins, then Savannah's junior crowns. My face appeared only in the background, blurred between their smiles. The truth is, I stopped trying long before Harvard. I learned to build my pride in silence, to celebrate alone. When I got my acceptance letter, I thought maybe finally I'd earned a place in that family portrait. But when the big day came, when the applause rose and those 2 front-row chairs sat empty, I understood. Perfection was never the truth. It was just the story my mother told the town. And for the first time in my life, I stopped wanting to be in it. Harvard was supposed to be my clean slate, the one place where the Hart legacy didn't exist. In Cambridge, no one cared who wore the crown of Miss Texas. All that mattered was what you could prove on paper, in class, in court. For the first time, I felt seen for my mind, not for my posture. Still, every achievement came with that quiet echo. Would she care? Would she even notice? So months before graduation, I did something I swore I'd stopped doing. I tried again. I spent 2 weeks writing the perfect message. It was short, polite, hopeful. The graduation ceremony will be June 10th at Harvard Yard. It would mean the world to me if you and Dad could come. I've already booked your hotel and bought your flights. Love, Venessa. I hovered over the send button for a full minute before finally pressing it. Then I waited. A day passed, then 2, then 5. Finally, her name lit up my phone. June 10th is the Miss Texas Finals. Savannah's worked so hard for this. You understand. 4 words. You understand. They burned hotter than any insult. It wasn't even a question. It was a command, an assumption that I would fold, that I would keep playing the same role. I always had the understanding daughter, the background character in her perfect picture. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred, then turned my phone face down. Outside my dorm window, snow fell in slow, quiet spirals, the kind of silence that doesn't comfort, but cauterizes. That night, I walked to the library, the one place where I'd built myself, piece by piece. Between the towering shelves of law journals, I opened my old journal, the one I'd started back in Abilene when no one clapped for me. I flipped through the pages filled with small victories notes to myself and stopped on a quote my grandfather, Judge Walter Hart, once wrote in his careful handwriting: "You don't need anyone's spotlight to be seen. Just stay whole." I sat there for a long time tracing those words. Something in me shifted. Not an explosion, just a quiet, irreversible tilt. Maybe I'd never have her applause. Maybe I'd never be the one who shines, but I could be the one who stops begging for light. So I folded the graduation invitation, placed it inside the back cover of that journal, and whispered to no one, "You wanted me to understand Mom fine. I finally do." It wasn't anger that filled me, it was clarity. And that clarity was the beginning of everything that came next. The night before graduation, the world outside my dorm room smelled like rain and lilacs. Inside my suitcase sat half-zipped on the bed, black heels, crimson gown, and one empty envelope where the family photos should have been. For weeks, I'd pretended not to care. I told my friends my parents were too busy to make it. I said it with a smile sharp enough to hide the sting. But that night, as the clock ticked toward midnight, the truth finally settled. They weren't coming, and I wasn't surprised. I opened my phone one last time. The message thread with Mom Linda Hart was short, lifeless. "You understand" still glowed like a scar I couldn't erase. Below it, a string of unread texts from my father Robert, all simple and safe, "Proud of you, kid." No punctuation, no calls. Just his same old silence wrapped in politeness. For the first time, I didn't reply. Instead, I scrolled through my photo gallery snapshots of study nights, debate wins, campus winters. Then, I reached the one I'd taken weeks earlier, 2 empty chairs under the Harvard banner during rehearsal. Something about that image stopped me. I stared at those chairs until a thought surfaced, soft but certain: if they won't sit there, I will. That's when I started writing. Not a message, not a plea, a speech. Every word I'd swallowed since childhood poured out the years of invisibility, the weight of being the understanding one. But it wasn't bitter. It was deliberate, like closing a door gently one final time. When I finished, I folded the speech neatly and slid it into the same envelope that once held their invitations. The envelope that once said, "Please come now," held the story of what happens when you don't. I packed the journal my grandfather, Judge Walter Hart, had given me, his words tucked between the pages. Stay whole. That was all I needed to carry. Before turning off the light, I did one last thing. I opened my contacts, scrolled until I found Mom, then Dad. And without hesitation, I pressed delete. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't revenge. It was reclamation, the quiet kind. The kind that doesn't make noise but makes room. Outside, the rain began to fall, tapping softly against the glass. I lay down, listening to it, realizing it wasn't a storm anymore. It was a cleansing. By morning, I knew exactly who I was walking for, not for the 2 empty chairs waiting in the front row, but for the girl who had finally stopped waiting to be seen. The morning of graduation, Harvard Yard looked like a postcard, sunlight spilling over brick buildings, flags fluttering in the soft June wind. The air smelled of old books and blooming magnolias, the kind of scent that feels like both an ending and a beginning. I dressed slowly, my crimson gown crisp against the white of my shirt. Every sound felt amplified, the rustle of fabric, the chatter of classmates, the brass band tuning up somewhere in the distance. Everyone had people waiting for them. Everyone but me. As we lined up to march, a girl behind me whispered, "Your parents must be so proud." I smiled. Maybe I said softly in their own way. When the ceremony began, the sound of applause rolled through the crowd like waves. Names were called one after another. Every few seconds, a new eruption of cheers, families shouting, waving, crying. Then came mine. Venessa Hart, Juris Doctor, Harvard Law School. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then a few polite claps, my friends, my professor, and one pair of hands I recognized instantly. I looked up. In the 3rd row, Grandfather Walter stood tall in his gray suit, the morning sun catching the silver in his hair. Beside him sat Ethan, the quiet med student who had seen me through long nights of studying and self-doubt. When their eyes met mine, both smiled, steady, proud enough to fill every empty seat around them. I walked across the stage, took my diploma, and turned toward the audience. 2 front-row chairs stood untouched, name cards pinned neatly, Mr. and Mrs. Hart. A small breeze caught the edges, making them flutter like the wings of something finally let go. That was my closure, not revenge, not triumph, just peace. But fate has a sense of irony. That afternoon, while I sat with Walter and Ethan near the Charles River, my phone buzzed with a message from my cousin Emma, who lived back in Abilene. She'd posted a photo on Instagram me on stage sunlight hitting my face diploma in hand crimson robe glowing against the blue sky. The caption read, "She did it. Alone." I stared at the picture for a long moment, feeling something shift deep inside. Not pride exactly, something quieter, like truth settling into place. By evening, the post had spread like wildfire. Abilene wasn't a big town. Gossip moved faster than weather. And on that same day, June 10th, another event was streaming live, the Miss Texas Finals starring Venessa Hart. In 2,000 miles of difference, two spotlights burned at once, one built on applause, the other on silence. While Savannah smiled beneath glittering stage lights, I stood with my grandfather taking photos by the Charles River. I didn't know yet that the world was watching both of us. By nightfall, messages began flooding in. Old classmates, former neighbors, even church members who hadn't spoken to me in years. "Is it true your parents didn't come? Linda was at the pageant the same day. Everyone's talking about it, Venessa." I didn't reply to any of them. I just scrolled, watching the story take shape on its own. Someone had posted a collage, two photos side by side. Left Savannah crowned on stage, tiara glittering mom, Linda crying as she hugged her. Right me at Harvard, sunlight on my face, two empty chairs behind me. The caption read, "Two daughters, two stages, one choice." It was brutal, and it was true. Within hours, local news picked it up. Former Miss Texas skips her daughter's Harvard graduation to attend beauty pageant. Comments poured in, half outraged, half stunned. Imagine missing Harvard for a tiara! She raised one daughter to be seen and one to be forgotten. Venessa didn't need the crown. She became it. By midnight, the town was split in two, the believers and the deniers. Church forums buzzed. Old friends whispered. The Hart family, once the model of elegance, had become the latest scandal. When my phone rang that night, I already knew who it was. Mom. I let it ring twice before answering. Her voice burst through the speaker, sharp, trembling. "What did you do, Venessa? Everyone's calling me a terrible mother. You humiliated this family." I stayed silent for a beat, letting her words bounce around the room. Ethan watched me from across the table, his eyes steady calm. "No, Mom," I said, finally my voice low. "I didn't humiliate you. You just didn't realize what it looks like when the truth stands under the light." A pause. Her breathing quickened. "You think you're better than us now?" "With your fancy degree? No," I said. "Just freer." Then I hung up. She called again. 5 times. I didn't pick up. By morning, the fallout had begun. According to Emma, church ladies whispered in pews, "Did you hear she missed Harvard for a crown?" Former pageant friends distanced themselves. Savannah's sponsorship offers paused for review. My father kept his head down at the garage, refusing to comment. For the first time, the family that had lived for applause was being watched and not in admiration. Ethan came over that evening with 2 cups of coffee. We sat by the window, scrolling through the chaos. He looked at me and asked quietly, "Do you feel sorry for them?" I thought for a long moment, watching the rain smear city lights across the glass. "No," I said. "But I don't feel angry anymore either. Because in that strange, poetic way life works, I didn't need to fight back. The world had simply mirrored them back to themselves." That night, I went for a walk alone. The Charles River rippled with reflections of streetlights, gold, white, and crimson. I stopped by the bridge, breathing in the cold Boston air. For years, I'd believed closure would come with an apology or a reckoning or a dramatic confrontation. But it didn't. It came from knowing I didn't need any of that. The applause that filled Harvard Yard was mine. The silence that followed was theirs, and I didn't have to trade one for the other ever again. A week after the story broke, I woke up to a short text from an unfamiliar number. "I'm in Boston. Can we meet? Dad." I stared at it for a while, the same way you study a wound that's already scarred, but still remembers the pain. Part of me wanted to delete it. Another part, the one that still remembered the quiet man with grease-stained hands who used to leave folded bills on my desk, couldn't. We met at a small cafe near Harvard Square. The city was wrapped in fog, soft and gray, as if the world itself was holding its breath. He looked older than I remembered. His voice cracked when he spoke. "I was wrong, Venessa," he said. "I thought keeping the peace meant keeping the family together, but all I did was let you fight alone." I said nothing. The truth didn't need my help anymore. He reached across the table, fingers trembling. "I don't expect forgiveness. Just thank you for becoming the person I didn't have the courage to be." I nodded once. That was enough. Later that evening, Mom called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. Her voice was brittle thin. "They're saying awful things about me," she whispered. "I just wanted Savannah to have the chances I never did." "You understand, don't you?" The same words again. "You understand." But this time they didn't sting. They sounded small, tired, like the echo of a story that had finally lost its power. "I do understand," I said quietly. "You wanted applause. I just wanted a mother." She started to cry. I didn't. When the call ended, I didn't feel victory. Just release the kind that comes when you finally stop expecting someone to change. That night, I visited Grandfather Walter. He listened to everything, his hand steady over mine. "You don't have to forgive to be free," he said softly. "You just have to stop needing their approval." For the first time, I understood what freedom really meant. Not the kind that roars, but the kind that breathes. The world had already delivered justice. All I had to do was live it. A year later, the chairs were no longer empty. Not the ones in Harvard Yard, but the two on my balcony in Cambridge, one for me, one for Ethan. We'd sit there in the evening's tea, steaming in our hands, watching the sun melt into the Charles River. The city hummed softly below us, alive but gentle, like it had finally learned to breathe at my pace. Sometimes I'd think of Texas, of the stage lights, the sequins, the crowns, the silence. But the memories no longer hurt. They just existed, like chapters of a story I had already finished writing. I used to believe closure came from confrontation, but now I know it comes from peace, the kind you build quietly, seat by seat, until the empty ones don't matter anymore. When the wind shifts, I still hear my grandfather's words, "Stay whole, Venessa," and I smile, because I did. Maybe you've had your own empty chairs moments when people you loved simply didn't show up. If you have, tell me where you're watching from tonight. You're not alone in it anymore.